Bienvenidos a todos y gracias por estar aquí. Thank you also, board members. Ever since the Government and Oversight Board together created the fiscal plan, it has been a statement of priorities. Established priorities means making choices, and sometimes difficult choices, to ensure that government expenses fit within expected financial resources. This year's fiscal plan is no different. However, many of the most difficult choices are behind us. With the government's bankruptcy completed, the fiscal plan is forward-looking, focused on the choices and investments that will help restore growth and prosperity to the people of Puerto Rico. After a long period of crisis and economic decline, fiscal responsibility and the practice of keeping spending commitments within available resources over the long term must remain the basic budgeting philosophy going forward. Economic growth is the key to unlocking Puerto Rico's future. Every fiscal plan investment, every reform, every initiative, and every law must be viewed through that lens. How does this investment contribute to the growth of the economy for all? And it is a question we must continually ask. And working together, the government, the legislature, the oversight board can implement a plan that truly transforms Puerto Rico. You heard me say this before, I'm results-driven. Progress for the over 3 million people of Puerto Rico is our goal. Progress, prosperity, and opportunity are also the goals of the oversight board, and I know it's the goal of the governor and the legislative leaders who also all share those goals. The people deserve no less, so over the coming months, we will continue to engage with all stakeholders on the reforms and initiatives in the fiscal plan that are critical for a solid foundation to support Puerto Rico's future economic growth. This year's fiscal plan, post the Commonwealth's Plan of Adjustment, focuses on priorities for growing Puerto Rico's economy. It includes substantial investments in the people of the future of the island. So today I will like to discuss some of the key investments. One of the largest investments, although not widely discussed, is the Earned Income Tax Credit for working families. We will also discuss other investments the government can make, including principles for a comprehensive tax reform and investments in municipalities that will help stimulate growth. This transformation plan focuses on 3 core pillars to achieve that goal. A robust, effective public sector is needed to set the foundation for growth. The fiscal plan prioritizes support for a high-performing public sector by investing in people and efficiency and effectiveness and the capacity of government to deliver more efficient and higher quality services. The fiscal plan also includes critical initiatives to support economic development, including actions to improve the ease of doing business, upgrading infrastructure, and to prepare the workforce to compete for jobs of the future, and a roadmap for tax reform. Strong fiscal management and long-term financial stability are both needed to prevent Puerto Rico from falling back into old habits of overpromising and overspending that resulted in the island's bankruptcy. Necessary improvements to systems and procedures that provide the foundation are already well underway. Appropriate spending discipline, however, is still needed to preserve and institutionalize the recent successes. These elements will provide a solid foundation for economic growth, and economic growth is needed to generate the revenues required to support the government's priority investments. We also must be mindful of the taxes collected from our people and businesses on the island to fund the government's operations. The chart on the right shows general fund revenues, the government's primary source of spending. It shows that the government is highly dependent on personal income taxes, taxes from corporations and from individuals, as well as the sales and use tax, which is cyclical to business cycles. So as we start to think about ways to stimulate economic growth, we must find a way to maintain stability of the largest revenue sources. It is also important to recognize that government is currently in receipt of an unprecedented amount of federal funds. These funds will spend out over the next decade. And in response to multiple natural disasters of COVID-19 pandemic, federal government has committed over $120 billion to Puerto Rico. It's equivalent to over 150% of the Commonwealth's gross national product. The impact of this infusion of dollars into the economy cannot be overstated. In fiscal year 2024 alone, the government currently expects to receive more than $13 billion in federal funds, nearly double its historic amount. These federal funds present an unprecedented opportunity if deployed efficiently and aligned to initiatives that improve long-term growth. While the Oversight Board does not directly oversee the federal fund expenditures, federal funding has such a substantial impact on the economy and its future direction that they must be part of the overall fiscal and economic growth conversation. The majority of the government's revenues are used to fund critical services, including health, education, public safety, and economic development. The fiscal plan includes significant direct investments in Puerto Rico's residents and infrastructure. Approximately 15% of general fund expenditures are dedicated to current year retiree benefits. In addition, a reserve trust is being funded to ensure that funds are available for commitments that were made to public employee retirees. In total, this funding benefits more than 300,000 current and future government retirees in Puerto Rico. Also, the amount required to fund debt service has been dramatically reduced and is not only lower, but it is now fixed over the long term, allowing for funding certainty for essential services. Every decision on spending is a decision on priorities, and decisions must be bounded by the resources that we have available, recognizing each time that every dollar spent in one area is a dollar not spent somewhere else. Even with these constraints, working with the governor and the legislature, the fiscal plans have a history of making substantial investments in people, operations, and the future of the island. The resources from these investments come from the government's budgetary cash resources, including the taxes that are collected from people working and living on the island. They include restoring retirement commitments to over 65,000 System 2000 participants, interest paid for 42,000 public employees, including 6,200 police officers, as well as $400 million in healthcare capital expenditures to improve, expand facilities and infrastructure. The fiscal plan also invests more than $450 million in public officers' salaries and more than $450 million to prepare for the future by expanding broadband access and technical and business education skills training for the workforce of today and tomorrow. This year's fiscal plan is no exception. In this year's plan, the Oversight Board approved substantial additional investments aligned to the fiscal plan pillars. Slides are a little off from what we're talking about here. Here we go. In this year's fiscal plan, the Oversight Board approved substantial additional investments aligned with the fiscal plan pillars. I will share more information on the Earned Income Tax Credit in a few minutes, but other investments include nearly $460 million in capital expenditures and $230 million for civil service reforms and salary adjustments. These investments will help make sure that the government has a highly qualified workforce to support economic growth. One of the most substantial investments to encourage work and stimulate growth and invest in the people of Puerto Rico is the Earned Income Tax Credit for working families, the EITC for short. The Earned Income Tax Credit is a refundable tax credit that encourages low to moderate income workers and families to work by giving them a fully refundable tax credit regardless of taxes paid. The credit is adjustable based on the family size and the income. And if you qualify, you can use the credit to reduce the taxes you owe, and it may even give you a refund, a refundable credit. even if you don't owe any taxes. By filing a return with Hacienda, you could get a refund and cash back. The EITC is also a very effective tool to encourage formal sector labor force participation and to give back to the people. This is especially relevant because Puerto Rico's formal labor force participation rate is lower than in the mainland U.S. This divergence is especially pronounced among workers aged 24 years and those over age 45. Measures to increase overall labor force participation will be instrumental in rebuilding Puerto Rico's economy. The EITC is successfully investing in Puerto Rico's workforce and helping to support household income. Expanding the EITC has been a fiscal plan priority for many years. Working together with the government and several NGOs, the Oversight Board helped structure the expanded EITC program for Puerto Rico and support the legislator's efforts to enact it into law in 2021. The maximum credit is now substantially larger for qualifying tax filers. The credit is designed to both encourage work in the formal economy and increase labor force participation. Already, many new tax filers are applying for the credit. As I will discuss more in a moment, it is, however, very important to monitor the overall costs and compliance of the EITC. As you can see, substantially more residents of Puerto Rico are benefiting from the new EITC structure. Among the highlights, more than 646,000 tax filers applied for the credit. This is nearly half of all returns filed on the island. This represents households including close to 1.5 million men, women, and children in Puerto Rico. It is also nearly triple the number of filers and more than 10 times the cost of the legacy EITC program it replaced. Additionally, the EITC is successfully bringing more people into Puerto Rico's formal workforce. In 2021, more than 120,000 filers who did not file taxes in 2019 and 2020 applied for the EITC. Given the magnitude of this population, it is likely many of these people were previously working in the informal economy. And the benefits of the EITC recipients are substantial. In 2021, the maximum benefit was as large as $6,500 and increases for inflation each year. The benefit structure is also relatively progressive, with households that have more children generally receiving a much larger benefit. Here you can see the other ways we know the EITC is working. On the left side of this page, you can see the total labor force is growing. The last time the labor force was this large was in 2011, but the population on the island was also substantially larger at that time. On the right, you can also see an attractive element of the EITC. More than 90% of the EITC's values goes to filers with incomes of less than $25,000 a year. This means that more than 575,000 lower-income households are directly benefiting from this program. The success of the EITC, however, has resulted in much higher costs than initially anticipated. While the benefits are clear, we must also be fiscally responsible and cautious about the total program size. As shown in the gray bar, the total cost of the program in the first year was close to $1.1 billion, substantially larger than the $800 million originally projected. The federal government contribution is 3 times the local investment. However, it is capped at $600 million. Puerto Rico's government must pay the full amount of any incremental costs. As shown on this page, year-to-date total costs are already similar to last year's full annual cost, and current projections imply the size of the program could be as large as $1.3 billion this year. This means that Puerto Rico's government will ultimately be responsible for funding approximately $700 million or more for this program, relative to the $200 million originally anticipated when the law was enacted. Given the rapid increase in locally funded costs above the original forecast, Puerto Rico will need to reevaluate the EITC forecast assumptions, and closely monitor whether the benefits are being accurately and equitably deployed, particularly to self-employed individuals and those claiming dependents. If strong compliance measures are not enforced, the government may need to adjust the size of the benefit to reduce the program or control the overall program costs. The benefits of this program are that the money actually goes directly to individuals, and then individuals generally spend this in the economy. So all of the funds from this program get recycled into the economy, and particularly people at this low income are actually spending all of the dollars. So 100% of the monies, even of the Commonwealth's funds and of the 1.3 billion, are really recycling within the local economy. Are there any questions amongst the board on the EITC program before we go to tax reform? Okay.
That was very helpful.
I'd like to make some general comments perhaps afterwards.
Okay. Principles of tax reform.
Yeah, we'll do that.
The Oversight Board has long advocated for a truly comprehensive tax reform that can contribute to Puerto Rico's competitiveness and contribute to economic growth. This is because the island's tax system has historically structured from complexity, instability, internal inconsistency, inefficient administration, and inadequate enforcement in the past. Having now exited the restructuring process, it is finally time to evaluate opportunities for broad-based, holistic tax reform. As the government decides how to evaluate a potential tax reform, a few key objectives and principles should be kept in mind. This includes reforms to Puerto Rico's tax system should reduce complexity, enhance equity, increase transparency, reduce administrative costs, reduce compliance costs, and maintain, if not enhance, revenue overall. Moreover, effective revenue systems generally should be based on taxes that generate sufficient revenue to fund the needed public expenditures and are simple to administer, are transparent, are perceived as fair and equitable, and encourage economic efficiency and growth. This is why there are 5 key principles that should be considered as part of any reform. These include 1, first, it must be affordable, and it must provide funding for essential services. Second, the government must consider adapting the current tax system to focus on broadening the base and lowering rates. Third, the tax system should be simple to administer, and there should be a perception of fairness. Fourth, rates, credits, deductions, and other alterations should be firmly established in the tax code. And finally, the government should avoid or limit tax expenditures and base those offered on return on investment. At the same time, any potential reform must be fiscally responsible, meaning it should not lose revenues in the process. Therefore, any tax reform or tax law initiative that the government undertakes or pursues must be revenue neutral over the long term. I would like now to turn to our last topic for discussion, which is municipal funding. Puerto Rico's 78 municipalities are critical in providing core services to residents of the island. They are often the first point of contact for residents and businesses that have to interact with the government. Given the important roles of municipalities, they must also contribute towards the Commonwealth's overarching goal of restoring growth and prosperity to the island. To achieve this goal, the municipalities, the Oversight Board, and the central government must all work together. Collaboration should be focused on progressing key municipal initiatives that will propel economic growth. Similar to the central government in recent years, Puerto Rico's 78 municipalities have confronted significant fiscal and economic challenges. To respond to this fiscal reality and to incentivize a new operating model between the central and municipal governments, starting in 2015, well before the enactment of PROMESA, the Commonwealth government proposed the reduction of certain Commonwealth financial transfers to the municipalities. The Oversight Board subsequently adopted the central government's proposal to reduce these financial transfers in the certified fiscal plans. Municipalities have been vocal in their request for additional funding from the Commonwealth. given the reductions in the Commonwealth transfer. And while the Commonwealth transfer has gradually reduced the direct transfer to municipalities, it is important to highlight the declines have been offset by several additional sources of funding authorized by the Oversight Board. Many of these funds are recurring, including more than $58 million to support waste management activities and $98 million to reduce municipal health care payments. As shown on this page, municipalities have also received more than $130 million in local funds to support other initiatives, and more than $2 billion in additional funding made available under federal law to support municipalities in their recovery from COVID-19. Together, these funding sources have temporarily stabilized municipal finances and enabled continued provision of core services to residents. The impact of these additional funding sources, when combined with the current Commonwealth transfers, can be visualized here. The Commonwealth transfer, represented in blue, is generally offset by the additional funding sources represented in red. Further, starting in 2024, the Oversight Board is willing to authorize additional incremental funding sources to municipalities, pending their achievement of certain key initiatives. With all efforts focused on the restoration of growth and economic renewal, the Oversight Board believes municipalities need to support these efforts as well. Municipalities are essential to driving economic growth and fiscal sustainability in Puerto Rico. Despite the significant incremental funding provided to municipalities, however, there has not been sufficient progress towards enhancing services and promoting economic growth. Additionally, many municipalities have not yet implemented the fiscal discipline required to reduce reliance on the Commonwealth appropriations. It is true, municipalities' financial needs vary, and assistance should be based on their needs. Municipalities must also look for ways to improve the delivery of government services and promote economic growth. The Oversight Board wants to collaborate with municipalities and the central government on the provision of additional resources to the municipalities. Importantly, the Oversight Board is prepared to authorize this additional funding. However, the municipalities must be willing to embrace reform. The Oversight Board cannot authorize more funding without real change. The page shows examples of potential reforms and initiatives municipalities could undertake. Achievements must be tied towards supporting economic development and fiscal sustainability over the long term. The Oversight Board plans to continue to support and work with the municipalities and the executive branch as part of the budget process for the coming fiscal year, 2024, to finalize these reform initiatives and additional funding needed. Many of these initiatives do require collaboration. It is important that the executive branch, the municipalities, and the legislature all work together to achieve the agreed-upon initiatives and reforms. Many of the reforms are on this list, and there may be other reforms that are not on this list that we would be willing to collaborate with the municipalities on. So I'd like to close my remarks by reiterating that the Oversight Board will engage with the central government, the legislature, and the municipalities to achieve key fiscal plan initiatives so additional incremental funding can be released. But all parties will need to collaborate and agree on clear and concise objectives and goals for each initiative. Specific implementation plans for these initiatives must also be developed, including targeted outcomes. Alignment on agreed initiatives and outcomes as part of the FY24 budget process will enable the release of additional funding. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, board members, we are putting Puerto Rico's bankruptcy behind us and now have a fiscal plan that invests billions of dollars in several key areas to help improve the growth prospects for the island. We still have a lot of work to do, and there are other important areas that we have not addressed here today, but we will. By collaborating and working together, we will be able to restore prosperity. That concludes my remarks.